to unpack well over 1,000 years of Roman history today. We'll be tracing the wild, fascinating journey of Rome, literally going from its chaotic, completely mythological origins as a tiny central Italian settlement, all the way to its spectacular, world-altering collapse. To make sense of this massive timeline, we're breaking it down into 5 key eras: myth to monarchy, rise of the Republic, birth of the Empire, the Golden Age, and finally, division and decline. By doing this, we can really focus on the systemic cause and effect reactions that actually drove Rome's evolution. We aren't just memorizing dates here, we're looking at exactly why the system changed.
So, looking at the big picture from 753 BC to 476 AD, this gives you a great mental map of how Rome's government drastically shifted. We're talking kingdom to republic, republic to empire, and eventually the whole thing fracturing.
Okay, Section 1, Myth to Monarchy. Let's see how this all kicked off with an incredibly messy origin story.
You know what's crazy? The founding of Rome literally came down to a petty sibling rivalry. Twins Romulus and Remus had just overthrown their treacherous uncle, but they couldn't agree on which hill to build their new city on. So they decided to let the gods choose via bird watching. Seriously. Remus saw 6 birds, Romulus claimed he saw 12, a massive argument broke out over cheating, and it ended with Romulus just outright murdering his brother. And boom, just like that, Rome is born.
Now, to actually populate this new, let's be honest, slightly cursed city, Romulus essentially set up a giant magnet for outcasts. It was an asylum city. It solved his population problem really fast by bringing in runaway slaves, debt dodgers, exiles, criminals, you name it. But it left them with a severe lack of women. Their wild solution? They invited a neighboring tribe, the Sabines, to a massive party and literally kidnapped their women. Super chaotic start, right? But it actually managed to merge the two populations into one functioning kingdom.
Moving on to Section 2, Rise of the Republic. After cycling through 7 kings, ending with one who was notoriously cruel, the Romans had finally had enough and fundamentally flipped their government.
They designed a new system specifically to prevent one man from ever holding absolute power again. Sound familiar? By creating a republic ruled by 2 consuls who switched out every single year and who could literally veto each other, they established an early blueprint for the checks and balances we rely on in modern democracies. They kicked out the monarchy and believed they had perfectly balanced the scales of power.
But then, the republic faced this massive psychological shock early on. They were humiliatingly defeated, and their city was sacked and held for ransom by the Gauls. Rome reacted to this sheer trauma by adopting a hyper-militaristic mindset. Basically, they decided the absolute only way to ever be truly safe was to proactively conquer everyone around them. It's kind of like Rome's villain origin story.
And this new militarism, it perfectly explains their ruthless efficiency during the 3 Punic Wars. Just look at how they adapted. When Carthage had a superior navy in the First War, Rome just straight up stole their ship designs and built their own. When Hannibal famously marched 37 elephants over the Alps to wreck Italy in the Second War, Rome absorbed the damage, adapted, and countered. And by the Third War, Rome simply erased Carthage from the timeline entirely, complete dominance. With their biggest rival gone, Rome basically became hopelessly addicted to endless expansion.
Which brings us to Section 3, Birth of the Empire. Let's see how this relentless expansion builds into the spectacular collapse of the very republic they fought so hard to protect. 23. That's the exact number of times Julius Caesar was stabbed by paranoid senators. Caesar had just conquered Gaul, marched his army right into Rome, and taken over. The Senate feared he was collecting political powers like trading cards, dictator, consul, head priest, and they were absolutely terrified he was crowning himself king.
But here is the incredible irony. By assassinating Caesar in the name of saving the Republic, the Senate sparked a massive civil war that permanently destroyed it. What they didn't realize was that the average Roman citizen actually loved Caesar. I mean, the guy fixed the confusing calendar, lowered their taxes, canceled debts, and made sure the poor had grain. By murdering the guy who was actually helping people, the Senate completely alienated the public and sealed their own fate.
All right, Section 4, the Golden Age. From the ashes of all this civil war emerged Caesar's adopted heir, Augustus, who officially birthed the Roman Empire in 27 BC. He brought in an unprecedented era of stability, and he succeeded where everyone else failed because he figured out the core problem. The Republic fell because soldiers were loyal to rich generals who promised them loot, not to the actual state. So Augustus standardizes the military,
Crucially, he has the government pay the soldiers and guarantee their retirement lands. Just like that, he completely eliminated the primary fuel for civil wars. Loyalty now flowed straight upward to the emperor. But systemic stability didn't mean invincibility. Case in point, the staggering 20,000 career Roman soldiers who were completely slaughtered in the Teutoburg forest. They were led into a brutal trap by a former Roman ally named Arminius. He used his insider knowledge of Roman military discipline to dismantle 3 entire legions in the muddy, dense forest of Germania. So this singular military disaster caused Rome to fundamentally rethink its whole identity. Augustus realized, okay, we can't just expand forever. Rome officially stopped pushing its borders outward, abandoned Germania entirely, and committed fully to defending the Rhine frontier. By hardening their borders and finally focusing on internal infrastructure, they cemented their golden age. And finally, Section 5, Division and Decline, because unfortunately, a system built primarily on military power eventually falls victim to it. Over the next few centuries, the Praetorian Guard, who were the emperor's elite bodyguards, realized they held the real power. They started assassinating emperors they didn't like, and get this, they even auctioned the throne to the highest bidder. This triggered the horrific crisis of the 3rd century. With emperors changing constantly, the empire entered a total death spiral of civil war, massive plagues, invasions from all sides, and absolute economic hyperinflation. To try and solve this nightmare, the Romans decided the empire was just way too big for one man to rule, so they took the radical step of physically splitting it. The wealthy, Greek-speaking East absolutely thrived from their highly defensible new capital in Constantinople. But this radical solution essentially doomed the Latin-speaking West. It left it as a resource-drained ghost province, highly vulnerable to invasions. And yeah, that vulnerability proved completely fatal. In the late 4th century, the terrifying Huns exploded out of the Eurasian steppe, driving other tribal groups right in front of them. Tens of thousands of displaced Goths arrived at Rome's borders, basically begging for asylum. What followed was an absolute masterclass in catastrophic border mismanagement. By importing a massive population that they fundamentally couldn't integrate, and then allowing corrupt Roman officials to deeply exploit and starve them, Rome literally manufactured its own fatal internal conflict. The desperate Goths finally revolted, destroyed a Roman army, and even killed the emperor. This completely shattered the psychological illusion of Rome's borders, triggering a massive chain reaction of armed groups pouring into the West. Stripped of its crucial tax base in North Africa, and sacked multiple times by different tribes, sometimes seemingly just for the fun of it, the Western Roman Empire simply succumbed to fatigue. There was no big cinematic final stand. In 476 AD, a Germanic commander just politely asked the wonderfully ironically named teenage emperor Romulus Augustulus to step down. And just like that, the Western Empire quietly died. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought. Considering the wealthy, heavily fortified Eastern Byzantine Roman Empire survived for another 1,000 years until 1453, did Rome really fall in 476 AD, or did it just smartly relocate? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and